welcome. We're going to get started now. So everybody, thank you so much for being here. A lot of familiar faces in the crowd, a lot of new faces, and we're so pleased to have you. For those who are new to us, welcome. My name is Zach Benjamin. I'm the Executive Director of the Jewish Federation of New Mexico. First and foremost, I want to thank you all for being here for this really historic occasion for our organization. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the chair of this evening's event, a multi-term past Federation president, current board vice president at large, and the chairwoman of our Federation's programming committee. Please welcome Sabre Minkus.
First, again, just to re-say what Zach said, thank you, everybody, all of our sponsors and all of you who came tonight. I think you're in for a very special treat. I became interested in Bob's work when I used to watch him frequently on CNN. And then he came along with the series Hunting Hitler on the History Channel. And of course that piqued my curiosity. And have continued to follow him, have read some of his books. And as you probably know, he is a world-renowned ex-CIA operative. His role was played by George Clooney in the movie Syriana, and Mr. Clooney got the Oscar. I hope Bob got some of the royalties. He speaks 8 different languages. He's the author of several books that have been on the New York Times bestseller list. And he's just a super nice person. And it is my privilege to introduce to you Bob Baer. Bob?
Let me tell you who I am and why I'm here, and that's I spent 21 years in the CIA. I joined on a prank. People ask me, why would you join the CIA? I was at Berkeley, and yeah, I know. I was at Berkeley, and anyhow, I was staying with a friend, sleeping on his couch, and said, you need a job. And I said, what do I know how to do? And we decided nothing, and there was a scandal in the newspaper about the CIA. It was Church Pike I know you're all too young to remember that, Church Pike committee hearings. And said, well, I'll apply for the CIA. So I called the Federal Center and said, I want to talk, this is Federal Center in San Francisco. I said, I want to join the CIA. Can I talk to the CIA? There's a long pause. I'm sure they thought they had a lunatic on the other end. And then they gave me a number in Lawndale, California. If anybody knows where Lawndale is, it's at Auto Malls. Anyhow, I wrote them, and I got in, and 21 years later, I'm in Iraq leading an assassination team to kill Saddam Hussein, and not the entire government was aware of it, nor was the FBI, that I had a lethal finding. Anyhow, when you get off the airplane and you're met by the FBI and you're badged for murder and attempted murder, it's time to move on when your employer's trying to put you in jail. So I resigned from the CIA. My wife did as well. We had got a letter of declination. It was all sorted out. We had a lethal finding. And since then, I've been in film, both documentaries, scripted and non-scripted. And that means I work for the History Channel, CNN, I write books, and trying to make sense of my career in the CIA and make sense of politics. And we're here tonight to talk at least a little bit about Adolf Hitler. And what we're doing is we're sailing very close to conspiracy theories. I do not do conspiracy theories. I have no use for them. They drive me crazy. And when the History Channel came to me and said, would you oversee an investigation into documents released by the FBI about the hunt for Hitler in 1945, would you do it? And I said no, because Hitler died in the bunker. And they said, look at the documents. The whole investigation looking for Hitler was based on the cranium of Adolf Hitler, which was held in the archives in Moscow. A professor went out to Moscow. The people running the archives were bribed to produce the cranium. And the man was very clever, and he took a DNA exfoliation of this cranium, had a bullet hole in the back, and it turned out to be a woman, and they could tell she's about 35 years old. It was not Eva Brown, by the way, Eva Brown. So we have FBI documents saying that he got away, and then we have the one piece of forensics when we start this is the cranium, and it's not Hitler's. So where's Hitler's body? I said, okay, I'll do this. And what I did was sat in a control room as teams went out, and what we did was pressure tested the FBI reporting and looked at the discussions inside the U.S. government. Again, I hate conspiracy theories, but when you have General Eisenhower saying in a closed meeting that Hitler got away in 1945, you have to wonder. Stalin said the same thing. J. Edgar Hoover had a full-on investigation and instructed the FBI to look for Hitler. So what we did is we went out and, all right, how did Adolf Hitler get out that late in Berlin out of the bunker? A lot of shelling going on. We found one tunnel that left the Chancellery bunker that went to the U-Bahn, and the U-Bahn went out to the airport. We do know that on the 21st of April, Hitler's personal effects were sent out on a very large airplane. Everything, you know, I don't know what his personal effects were, but there was a manifest for him. So clearly the intent was to get him out. But by May, the Russians are so close, you couldn't take off from the major airport close to the bunker, and that was Tempelhof. So we said, how did he get out? And we had, using ground-penetrating radar, we discovered a tunnel that went from the bunker to the sewer system and out to the Tiergarten, which is the main park in Berlin. Which still doesn't explain, because if you look at the Tiergarten, you can't land an airplane. So what we did was discover that they had cut down the light poles in April so a small airplane could take off. And they were sending small airplanes out of Berlin right until the end. And anybody who's done special ops know that if you fly an airplane low over a battlefield very quickly, it's really hard to hit them with a rifle or anything else. They're moving fast. If you hear it, it's over you. All right, so we know he can get out of Berlin through the Tiergarten. And then we said, well, then what happened to him then? So what we did is go through the old Nuremberg archives and digitize them so that we could search for him. And we found SS colonel who said they had seen Hitler, that he had left Berlin, flew in a small airplane to a place called Hohenlohen, which was Himmler's residence. And from there, we had another witness that shows him at Rechlin Air Force Base. And then we have two witnesses at an airfield in Denmark who all claim they saw Hitler. Now, there's a lot of Hitler sightings over the years. There's still some, I would imagine. Usually, it's in the National Enquirer stuff. But all of these witnesses had been arrested by the British Army, by the Russian Army, and they were, of course, this is for the internet, and they're completely independent of each other. So we looked at the chronology, and it all coincided. So the sightings all worked in the chronology. Not only that, but we found Hitler's medicine in Hohenlohen, Himmler's house, same stomach medicine. Then we traced a possible escape route up to northern Norway to a fjord where they were flying seaplanes out, and there were intercepts of the Germans, and what they were doing is they'd fly the seaplanes their maximum range, and then they would hook up with a U-boat which would refuel them, and they were going to South America. This is very hypothetical until you get to the tri-border region where there's a Nazi site that had a lot of Hitler's personal effects, had his medicine, and had a very large house with running water, its own electrical supply, a guardhouse for Nazi guards. It was on the Prana River. It was a 5-day walk from any sort of road, so it was hard to get into. And you know, the question of University of Buenos Aires is, who was this for? Because at this time, in 45 to 55, until Perón falls, you've got Nazis running everywhere. I mean, senior Nazis wanted. So what Nazi felt that he had to go out into the tri-border region with a battalion and defend himself on the Prana River? And so from 45 to 55, you look at the evidence, escape routes, and what we did at that point, and this goes over 3 years, we simply took it to FBI agents and said, all right, here's the evidence, here are the data points, and these are very serious guys. And they said, would you issue a fugitive warrant on Adolf Hitler based on the information going from 45 to 55? And every one of them said absolutely yes. They have caught fugitives with much less information than that. Now, none of this meant there's no body, and since then, after we did the series, the Russians allowed a French team in to look at Hitler's mandible, which the KGB says they've been holding in Lubyanka prison in the basement. They did not let the French take a DNA sample, which of course is key, would put an end to this story. It's all based on dental records, based on his dentist, drawings, and what the dentist said. And the dentist made his statements under KGB control. You know, if you look at Occam's razor, you know, he probably died in the bunker, but I, as an intelligence officer, found it fascinating that the entire US government was looking for him, as were the British, as was everybody. They simply did not believe the first stories that he had died in the bunker. They just didn't believe it. And these are a lot of serious people with better things to do. And for me, and then I'm gonna, if you don't mind, transition into other things, is that the press and really Congress and the American people have about a 5-minute attention span, and so does the press. 5 minutes before and 5 minutes after the event. And then the government's interest at this point, and I say this having dedicated my life to the government, becomes to soften the narrative. You know, smooth out the narrative, make everybody go to bed at night, think things are fine. But there's so much that is not coming out. And I did another show on JFK. I believe that Oswald was the shooter. I believe he was out of his mind. But there's so many unanswered questions. And this is what I do pursue all the time. For instance, we had, and this is public now, we had a defector from Cuban intelligence who did more damage to Cuba than anybody has ever over all these years. He worked for Castro. And he said, on the 23rd of November, that he was at the signals intelligence site in Havana and was told to turn off his coverage of Florida and Washington, D.C., and turn it on Dallas, the first time ever to pick up police comms. And I don't know what that means, whether Castro got wind of it or not. And I look at Abbottabad raid. I mean, I don't know, anybody in the military here? That's, yeah. I mean, you basically look at the range of Black Hawk helicopters, and they can't fly from Afghanistan to Abbottabad. They have to land, and they did a base of 500 people, a FARP. So where was that base? It's in the tribal areas. So there's huge parts of this narrative that the governments just really like to, you know, we're doing our best. It doesn't mean that there's a conspiracy theory necessarily. It's what they don't want to do is admit they don't have answers to the questions. 9/11, they simply don't have the answers. When the ambassador calls in the governor of Riyadh, the current king of Saudi Arabia, he says, he's pounding on the table and says, why were there 15 Saudis on those airplanes? You know what the king answered in a back channel, or you know, in a very private conversation? He said it was a Mossad operation. And that's as far as the Saudis would go. So we don't know, and I certainly don't know, how those 15 Saudis got on those airplanes. Somebody recruited them. Somebody said, you know, go to the United States. And had to vet them, because if you're going to hijack an airplane, you better know who your hijacker is. But we still don't have those answers. So since I've left the CIA, I keep on picking away at these things, and I'm looking for people who know the story, and that's what I've done since. And people on the Hitler show said, well, this is just dumb, you know. This is, you know, the History Channel. I don't really work full time for the History Channel. They do too much stuff on Hitler. But the fact is, if you look at from 45 to 55, there's a good case. You could make the case he got away, and that was never presented in public. And those, by the way, all those documents, if you want to look at them, the FBI, they're all declassified. They're all on the internet. You can make up your own mind. But I thought it was a fascinating exercise, the way governments work.
Could you comment on, did he have a mental disorder or Parkinson's, or do we know for sure?
Oh, he was very sick, and he was doing drugs, and he was he clearly had a mental disorder. You know, he used to. The Germans called him the carpet eater. You must know this, where he'd roll over and start chewing on the carpet so he wouldn't bite his tongue off. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, he was clearly out of his mind. But what scares me about the Hitler thing, and I just thought this was total BS, was the idea of the Fourth Reich. But when you go through South America and you start looking at the communication sites, right, military communication sites, and then when we went through that nuclear site, they were clearly in 1955 intending to make a nuclear bomb, which they were going to drop on Manhattan. Now this is not BS history. You go to Bariloche, you can go to this place, and the Argentine Air Force, because there were so many Nazis up there, didn't just send the police up to tear this apart. They destroyed it from the air, and they had full-on enrichment capabilities. They had the lenses for implosion devices, the whole thing, and that was their plan, and it was a Nazi Zionist. You know, I often wonder if the Nazis put it out there he was still alive because he was going to be the mascot for building the Fourth Reich. It doesn't matter whether they were out of their minds. I'm just telling you that's what their plans were.
What parallels might be drawn between events leading to the rise of Hitler and conditions today?
Well, actually, I'm writing a book on this, on faith and fear. I give lectures at universities. People who are afraid will look toward an authoritarian leader. They simply, and then they tend to look at the elite. Anybody with money, education, and they look at science itself as the enemy. And so you look at the 2008 recession, and you know, I'm going to give you a pessimistic message that if we hit another recession, you're going to see a lot of people that will take reason and science and fact and flush it down the toilet. For them, facts are accusations, and they will look to faith as a way to, and especially global warming. This is what I'm really taking a look at, is people, every time there's been great changes in the climate, it's led to disruptions. And, you know, the peoples of the sea, you know, the Enlightenment before that was there was a climate change, and they started burning witches in Germany, in Bamberg, and then the rest of it. So it's going to really depend, and as long as there's great inequality, and then people think they're suffering, and mainly people on the downward slope, like the Germans were in the 20s, tend to latch on to some irrational idea which makes no sense at all, and they're looking for a patriarch who, you know, anybody looking at Hitler now, he made no sense at all. I mean, none on any level. And it was, and you look at the Khmer Rouge. They had one side, they had Vietnam, on the other Thailand, and they thought they were getting crushed. It was in the middle of war, and they took on an ideology that was just flat out insane. And there's such an established history that that's what worries me most. That an Adolf Hitler in this country is not impossible, and if we hit an economic wall, we're going to get something pretty bad. That's the CIA way of looking at things, so I apologize.
Okay, here's our last question for the night, and maybe it's one for all of us after hearing Bob. But Bob, what keeps you up at night?
Besides my mother, she's going to show up from the grave. And what keeps me up at night is global warming. I think it's real. I think we see it in the Southwest. We see it here, and it's going to change things fast. And we do not deal well with change. We grew up in a golden age. You know, I think we all did. And we just do not, we react badly to it. We do not react with reason and fact and science and the rest of it. And every time the temperature goes up or a glacier goes in, or you look at the weather in New Delhi's like microdosing arsenic, you know, all of those things scare me. And, you know, it may turn out well, we may be able to adjust, but when large numbers of people are sent whichever way, migrate, and they run into other people, it just, in humanity with Homo sapiens, we just don't do well. So, I mean, not that I have any solutions for global warming, but that's what keeps me up at night. We can live with terrorist attacks here and there, and we can win, and we can predominate, and we can predominate against the Russians, but if the climate does pick up, like some are predicting, that's what scares me.
Thank you very, very much for being here. Just a quick housekeeping point. For those of you who have a book who want to get it signed, if you will go to maybe make a little line at the table right by where you came in, and you'll get your books signed. And again, a thank you to all of our sponsors, a special thank you to Jane Hochberg for helping with the arrangements, making this a very special evening, and to everybody else who helped. Thank you.